And Costado says, oh, come on, don't bash games like Flower. I rather like them. It's not like they take away from your AAA run-and-gun titles. Oh, don't open up that debate again, Costado.
Yeah.
The old, are games art? Oh, shall we have that discussion now, Scott? We might as well for the reboot. Get it out of the way on the first ever show.
Games are art. There's a fine line between games being art and games being entertaining. And yes, games like Flower, if you are entertained by pretty colours and weird puzzle mechanics, then fine. I'm not here to fucking ruin your enjoyment. If you enjoy that game or enjoy any game that I've talked about and I don't really care for, that's fucking awesome. It's yours. But my point of view is that people have forgotten what is gameplay and what is art. And there's a few companies that are towing the balance between both of those, and they're doing it really well. But there's other games, other people who make games or games companies who go either one or the other. I'd rather play a game that looks like absolute shit, but I'm having fun playing, rather than looking at something that's really beautiful and I'm not playing the game at all. It's finding the fine balance between the two ideals.
Right. I think, Scott, that nobody in the art industry, from my experience, actually knows what art, in inverted commas, is. Everybody's got a different opinion on it. So you could bring this argument up for pretty much any game. Oh, this game's far too artistic for my liking. But then you've got those games, like you say, that fuse. I'm trying to think of some good examples of this.
Top of my head, games like Ease, recent games like Bastion, Borderlands, that was very between arty, like comic booky, and gameplay. Yeah, it's those sort of games. They have an art style which is really striking, but also is a decent game. While there's other games where you're sitting there bored out of your mind, clicking a button when the game fucking tells you to.
Right. What about stuff like Mad World and the cel-shaded Zelda games?
I really enjoy Mad World, by the way, but that's because I'm borderline psychotic. I enjoyed Mad World for, his art style actually, be quite honest with you, when it comes to Mad World, that was kind of distracting. Black and white, yes, they were trying to go for a black and white look to make the blood look as bright neon red as possible. But I found that sometimes the black and white got a bit too much. Case in point, a game like Mad World, sometimes the artistic approach got in the way, become distracting.
I've never actually played Mad World, but I've seen videos of it. And what console is it on? Is it
on the Wii?
The Wii.
Right, the Wii, yeah. It's one of those games that it was an interesting experiment, the best way to call it. It was published by Sega, but it was done by, I can't remember now, but it was one of those games where it's on the Wii. They can't really do a straight gore-fest game. Well, they did. Some games were like House of Dead Overkill in, say, Manhunt 2, but they were trying to make a more stylistic, like Suda 5-1 style game. And for the most part it worked, but like I said, sometimes the art style did become distracting. It's like watching a 3D film that, I'll go back to Transformers 4. The 3D was, for the most part, good, but when the shaky cam started coming, I just felt like I was having a migraine coming on, so the visuals got distracting. And that's the same with Mad World.
Well, like you say, it is a very, very fine line. Kit171 says, Okami is pretty much the only literal art game that I know of, at least. And the art didn't get in the way of the gameplay, which, as I've said for so long over the years, gameplay, here, is greater than the graphics. It's the entire reason you play games to begin with, the interactivity. The issue with art is it's completely subjective, with no concrete rules as to what is or isn't. In the end, games can be and are art. I 100% agree with you on that. It is an art form, but I guess the argument is, does it class as fine art?
That's going into that bloody territory again, where people with wispy beards and rimmed glasses go into art galleries and shrug their chins over is Call of Duty 4 a renaissance what the fuck ever. I don't get that point of view. Games are meant to be fucking played, not stared at. When it comes to that sort of, and I'm going to say the word again, that sort of pretentious point of view, I can see people think games are art and they want to see them as art, but it's not an art form that, from a traditional sense, it's not like a watercolor painting or a fine orchestral score. It's something different. It's something new. It's something that hasn't really been tapped into before. It's something completely different, and it should be treated in a more interactive and looser light. Like I said, it's not like a watercolor painting that's, you know, apparently some sort of masterpiece. It's going to have a lot of flaws, but in the end, it's an entertainment product. You're there to be entertained in an interactive sense. So a painting doesn't give you that. It's not going to grab you by the collar and drag you into the world, aha, take on me style, is it? So when it comes to this argument of are games art, you got to be more realistic about the art behind the game. They've been built to be entertaining, not just hang on a wall and be extremely expensive.
Well, I tend to think that video games are art because in 100 years' time, people will look back on this era and say, yes, that was an art form. People will study it. There'll be whole degree courses and PhD courses about it. Yeah. People will do television shows and documentaries about it. They'll study it. And I think we're just a bit too blind to it right now. It's all a bit too new. Video games have been around since 1950s, maybe even just a little bit earlier, commercially since the 70s.
Well, yeah, let's be honest, it really started in the late 70s, the arcade machines and Pong and whatever.
That's right. And I do think that, yes, I will say yes, video games are art, but not as we know it. There we go.
Yeah, it's an emergent art form which really can't be put on a pedestal yet.
That's right. People didn't talk about Picasso till after he died. Or at least he didn't start earning money till after he died, which is the biggest irony of all. Costado says, still think you're confusing art and graphics here.
Bottom line is, I think you're not understanding what I'm trying to get at, where it's not a painting. So that's enough of that subject, let's move on.
Yes, because we're seeming to rile a few people up with this.